In the blue dark of a Montana December, the mountains hold their breath. Snow covers everything: the road, the trees, the long silence between one town and the next. From above, it is just white and gray, and the occasional smear of headlights moving through the dark like something trying to find its way home. Closer now, a road that is barely a road. Two frozen grooves in the earth leading upward through the pines. Closer still, a lodge at the end of it. 3 stories of gray stone and weathered timber alone on the mountain. The way only things that have been there a very long time are alone, not abandoned. Waiting. On the porch, a single lamp burns. It has been burning every night for 40 years. Inside, something is hidden under the floor of room 4. Has been hidden there for a long time. Long enough that the person who hid it is gone now. Long enough that no one living knows what it means. Until tonight, a bus door opens in the cold. She was 19 years old, and she had been sleeping in a laundromat for 11 days. Not metaphorically sleeping, not struggling to find her footing, or between living situations, the way people say when they want to make a thing sound smaller than it is. She was sleeping on the folding table between the 3rd and 4th dryer from the left, because the 3rd dryer ran all night and threw enough heat to keep the cold from becoming dangerous. She had learned this on night 2. Night 1, she had slept on the bench near the door and woken up with her fingers numb and a man staring at her through the glass. She did not sleep near the door after that. Her name was Dwin Farley. 19 years old, 5 feet 4, brown hair that needed cutting, a coat that had belonged to someone else, a woman at the church donation bin who had looked at Dwin's thin jacket and said nothing, just handed the coat across without making it a thing. The coat was olive green and too large in the shoulders and smelled faintly of cedar and old perfume. Dwin wore it every day. She had stopped noticing the smell around day 4. Now, it just smelled like her. She had $19 folded into the lining of the coat. Not in her pockets could be picked, pockets could fall out, pockets were the first place anyone looked. The lining, a small tear she had made herself with her thumbnail just big enough to slide a folded bill through. $19 in bills of various sizes that she had been adding to and subtracting from for 3 weeks, and the current total was 19. 11 days in the laundromat. $19. And a letter. The letter had come 8 days ago. She had been working the counter at the laundromat, not officially working, not paid, but the owner, Mr. Sabo, was 73, and his eyes were bad, and he had decided sometime in week 1 that Dwin was a fixture like the change machine, and had stopped asking questions about why she was always there. She sorted. She helped old women reach the high machines. She watched the door. In exchange, Mr. Sabo did not ask her to leave. The letter had been slid under the door one morning while Mr. Sabo was in the back, and Dwin was eating a packet of crackers she had bought with 47 cents. She had seen it from across the room, a white envelope on the cracked linoleum floor. The kind of envelope that meant official, that meant someone had gone to the post office and paid for good paper. She had not moved toward it right away. She had sat there with her crackers and looked at it from a distance, the way you look at something when you are not yet sure if it is good news or the kind of news that wears good news clothes. Then she crossed the room, picked it up, her name on the front, her full name, which nobody used, Dwin Marie Farley, and below that, the address of the laundromat written in neat block letters. Someone had known to find her here. The return address, Muse and Associates Attorneys at Law, Caldwell, Montana. She had put it in the lining of the coat with the $19, and she had not opened it for 2 days because opening it meant it became real, and real things in Dwin's experience had a way of becoming heavy very fast. She opened it on the 3rd day at 2 a.m. when the laundromat was empty and the dryers were all running and the sound was like low thunder, and the windows were fogged with the difference between inside and outside cold. She read it 3 times. Then she sat on the folding table and looked at the wall. Then she read it a 4th time. The letter was from a man named Garrett Muse, attorney. He wrote in the careful, slightly formal way of someone who had spent decades writing letters that contained life-changing information and had learned to do it without fanfare, because fanfare in these situations tended to make things worse. He wrote Miss Farley, "It is our duty to inform you that Ms. Solvier Grant of Veldon Crossing, Montana, passed away on October 14th of last year. Ms. Grant named you as sole beneficiary of her estate, which includes the property known as Veldon Crossing Lodge, located at the terminus of Grant Road, Veldon, Montana, along with all structures and approximately 40 acres of mountain land. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange transfer of deed. We understand this may come as a surprise. Dwin read that line 4 more times. She did not know any Solvier Grant. She did not know anyone in Veldon, Montana, which was a town she had never heard of. She had never, to her knowledge, received anything from anyone, not a gift, not a card on her birthday, not a phone call from a distant relative she had forgotten about. She had no distant relatives. Her mother had been the last of something. And yet, at the bottom of the letter, below the attorney's signature and the office address and the small print about responding within 30 days, there was a handwritten note, added in pen blue ink, slightly messier than the typed text above it, like something added at the last moment, like something the writer had almost not included. She said you'd know what to do with this. And taped below those words, wrapped in a small square of cotton cloth, a coin, old, silver or silver-colored, worn smooth at the edges from long handling. She turned it over. 4 numbers on the back, 1965. That was all. No explanation, no other note. Just the numbers worn into the metal by decades of someone's thumb. Dwin held the coin in her palm for a long time. It was warm. That was the thing. It had been taped inside an envelope inside a coat pocket for however long the attorney had been carrying it, and it should have been cold. It was warm, the way things are warm when they have been held. She did not know what 1965 meant. She did not know what she was supposed to do with a coin and an inherited lodge from a dead woman she had never met in a town she had never heard of. She did not know most things which had been the running condition of her life for 19 years, and she had more or less made her peace with it, but the coin was warm, and that was something. She had spent $14 of her $19 on a bus ticket. That left $5. She had bought 2 packets of crackers and a bottle of water for the trip, and that had left $2 and some change, which she put back in the coat lining next to the coin. The bus to Veldon left Billings at 6 in the morning on a Thursday in December, and Dwin was on it, wearing the 2 large olive coat with the brass buttons and her mother's scarf around her neck, dark red wool going thin at one end, the only thing of her mother's she still had, and a canvas bag with everything she owned in it, which was not a large amount. She had not told anyone she was going. There was no one to tell. That was the thing that people did not understand about being 19 and alone. It was not dramatic. It was logistical. There was no tearful goodbye at the bus station, no one to wave at the window. There was just Dwin and the bus and the coin in the lining of her coat pressing against her hip through the cloth. She had left at 5:40 to walk to the station. The city was still dark. The streets were iced. She had walked carefully, shoulders forward, the canvas bag on her back, and she had not let herself think about where she was going, because thinking about it made it large in a way she couldn't carry yet. She thought instead about small things, the way her boots sounded on the ice, the vapor of her breath, the fact that the bus would be warm. This was a skill her mother had taught her without teaching it, the skill of reducing a large thing to a sequence of small, manageable steps. You don't eat the whole mountain, her mother used to say. You just put one foot in front of the other, and one day you look back and the mountain is behind you. Her mother had been 38 when she died, lung damage from years of working in a building with bad ventilation. Not dramatic, not fast, just slow and then complete. Dwin had been 16. She had gone to live with her Aunt Fenna, who had been kind enough at first and then less kind as the months went on, and her boyfriend moved in and the apartment got smaller. Dwin had left at 17, had come back at 18 when things got bad, had left again at 18 and a half. Fenna had driven her to the bus station in October, had not said goodbye the way a person says goodbye when they expect to see you again. Dwin had not said it either. They were alike in that way, which was the one thing about Fenna that Dwin understood. The bus took 4 hours and change. She slept for 2 of them. Not good sleep. The nodding, half-conscious sleep of someone who has learned to rest without fully letting go, because fully letting go in public was a thing that had consequences. She woke at every stop, checked her bag, felt for the coin, slept again. The mountains appeared gradually, the way they always do from a bus first, as shapes at the edge of the sky that you think might be clouds, then as something too solid and persistent to be clouds, then suddenly as the only thing big and immediate, the road rising into them and the trees closing in on both sides. Montana in December. She had been in Montana her whole life, and she had never gotten used to this. The way the mountains made everything else feel like it had been operating at a reduced scale. The way the sky was different up here, lower, closer, a specific shade of blue-gray in winter that she didn't have a name for, but would have recognized anywhere. She pressed her face against the cold window glass. Veldon. The bus stopped at a gas station that was also a post office, that was also apparently a hardware store, because the window displayed both postage rate charts and a hand-lettered sign advertising chainsaw oil. Population sign at the edge of town. Veldon elevation 4,820 feet. Someone had written below that in marker and worth every inch. She got off the bus. The driver said the next bus back to Billings came through on Saturday. Today was Thursday. She said thank you. She picked up her bag. The doors closed and the bus pulled away, and she was standing in the parking lot of a gas station, hardware post office in Veldon, Montana, with $5 and some change and a canvas bag and a coin she didn't understand. And it was 23 degrees and the wind was moving through the pines above the road with a sound like the world exhaling. She stood there for a moment, just breathed. Then she looked at the hand-drawn map the attorney's office had sent along with the letter. Turn left at the gas station. Follow Grant Road 1.4 miles. The lodge is at the end. You'll know it. She turned left. She walked. Grant Road was not a road in any modern sense. It was a track. 2 parallel grooves worn into the earth and then frozen that way, snow-packed between them, the trees on either side standing close and tall and very dark against the white. No streetlights, no other footprints, just the track ahead of her and the sound of her boots and the occasional snap of ice in the branches above when the wind moved. She walked for 20 minutes. She thought about her mother, about the way her mother used to hum when she cooked, not songs, exactly just sounds low and rhythmic, the musical equivalent of those small steps her mother always talked about. She thought about the coin in the coat lining. She thought about the attorney's handwritten note. She said, "You know what to do with this," which implied that Solvier Grant had known something about Dwin that Dwin did not know about herself, which was an unsettling thing to inherit along with a lodge, which was possibly the whole point. She came around a bend in the track and stopped. The light appeared first. a single lamp on a high porch burning yellow-orange against the dark blue of the early evening sky. Then the porch itself wide and deep, wrapping around the front of the building. Then the building 3 stories of gray mountain stone and silver weathered timber, the kind of structure that had not been built so much as grown, that had been added to and repaired and added to again over decades until it had become less a building and more a presence. A turret on the east corner, shutters painted once in deep red, now faded to the color of old blood, the red still showing in the cracks. And around the base of the porch, pushing up through the snow in tight orange gold clusters, marigolds, in December, in Montana, flowering. She stood at the bottom of the path and stared at them for a long time. They were everywhere, along the porch boards, up through the frozen ground, beside the steps, following the railing post by post in small, determined groups. Every shade of yellow and orange and copper, the blooms tight in the cold but open, alive. Flowers didn't do this. Not in December, not in Montana at elevation. She knew enough about winter to know that. And yet there they were, stubborn and small, and improbably present, as if they had decided the rules did not apply to them, as if they had been here long enough to make their own. She thought about the attorney's note again. She said, "You'd know what to do with this." She didn't know anything yet. She was 19 years old, and she had walked 1.5 miles in the dark with $5 and a mysterious coin, and she did not understand anything that was happening. But she was looking at flowers in December, at the top of a mountain, on the porch of a lodge she apparently now owned, and something in her chest small and unfamiliar, and not quite what she would have called hope, but in the neighborhood said, "Okay, go up." She went up. There was a man on the porch. She saw him when she was halfway up the path. He had been there already, she realized, standing in the shadow beside the porch door, very still, the kind of stillness that belonged to a person who had learned to be patient at a cellular level. He was tall, old, 80 maybe or close to it, a flannel shirt the color of pine bark work pants that had been mended at both knees with denim from a different pair. He held a carpenter's square in his right hand, which he didn't put down. He watched her come up the path. She stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. They looked at each other. "You have her walk," he said. His voice was quieter than she expected, not soft exactly, more like a voice that had learned to be precise and had stopped needing volume. Her walk. Solveig. The way she put her feet down, like she was testing the ground before she trusted it. Dwyn looked down at her boots, then back up at him. "I'm Dwyn Farley. The attorney sent a letter." "I know he did. I told him where to send it." He came down the steps carefully, one hand on the railing, but not slowly, not the way old people moved when they needed to be slow, just careful, the way a man moves who has learned to respect ice. Pederuv. I knew this house when Solveig had just moved in. I built the porch railing in '86 after the old one rotted, re-chinked the north wall in '94, fixed the boiler 4 times, and after she died, he paused at the bottom step, looked at her with eyes that were very steady and a particular shade of blue-gray that matched exactly, she thought, the Montana winter sky. After she died, he said, I kept the lamp on. She looked up at the porch light. Every night, he said, she told me someone would come. There was nothing to say to that. Or there were 100 things to say to it, and none of them were right yet. And so she said the only sensible thing available. Can I see inside? He went up the steps, held the door. There's coffee, he said. I make it weak. Solveig always said I made it too strong. She went through the door. The lobby was bigger than it looked from outside. High ceilings, the beams visible and old and very dark, the wood of them gone almost black with age and smoke. A wide staircase curving up the far wall, the banister carved with a simple repeating pattern, pine needles she thought worn smooth from long use. On the right wall, the reception desk, dark oak, a lamp with an amber shade throwing a circle of warm light. Behind the desk, a row of brass key hooks numbered 1 through 12, the numbers painted in gold that had mostly faded. Most hooks held nothing. 3 still held keys. Dust moved in the amber light, the slow golden kind, the kind that suggested the dust had been there for years and had organized itself. It smelled like cedar, like old wood and cold stone, and something underneath faint, sweet pepper warm that she couldn't name for a moment. Then she could. Marigolds, the dried stems and petals of marigolds, the smell that comes from them when they've been pressed or dried or simply been present in a place long enough to become part of the air. She stood in the middle of the lobby and breathed it in. Peter had gone to make the coffee. She could hear him moving in the kitchen at the back, the sound of water, the low sound of a burner igniting. She was alone in the lobby with the amber light and the dust and the smell of marigolds and the 12 key hooks and the 3 remaining keys. She walked to the reception desk. In the long, shallow drawer below the counter, the kind of drawer that had once held guest cards and pencils and the small record-keeping of a working hotel, she found a guest register, green leather cover, the spine-cracked pages thick. She opened it. The first entries were from 1956. The handwriting changed by decade, a different register keeper for each era of the lodge. She turned pages slowly, the way you turn the pages of something old that you're not sure you have the right to read. She found what she was not looking for on page 47. Summer 1961, a signature in handwriting that sloped slightly left, that had the quality of someone who had learned to write carefully because their letters had to be worth the effort of reading them. 2 words in the column marked Purpose of Visit to Find. The name in the name column, Solvier Grount Billings MT. To find. No object, no person, just the verb and its hope. Dwin closed the register carefully. She set it back. She looked at the 3 remaining keys on their brass hooks. Number 4, number 7, number 12. Peter brought the coffee in 2 mugs. Hers had a chip in the handle. His had a faded illustration of a mountain on the side that might have been the Rockies or might have been anything. They sat at the kitchen table. The kitchen was large and clean and very cold in the corners, the kind of cold that radiates from old stone walls no matter how long you run the heat. The table was wood old enough to have the memories of 100 meals in its surface. A window above the sink looked out at the darkness and the snow, and just barely visible in the porch light, the orange heads of marigolds. "Tell me about her," Dwin said. Peter wrapped both hands around his mug, looked at it. "She came in the winter of '83, he said. Drove up in a truck that shouldn't have made it on these roads. It did anyway. Solveig had a way of convincing machines to do unreasonable things." A pause. "She had 2 boxes of tools and a chainsaw and a duffel bag. She paid the county tax that was owed, which nobody had paid in 3 years, and she moved in. And she stayed. For 40 years. For 40 years. She rented rooms in the summer. She fixed things herself when they broke. She kept the garden." He looked up. "She never talked much about before. Before Veldon, before the lodge. Whatever she was running from or toward, she didn't say. And I didn't ask because up here you learn that some things people carry are theirs to carry. But she left it to me. She left it to you." "Why?" Peter looked at her for a moment, the way a person looks when they are deciding how much of the truth to give someone they're not sure can hold it yet. "She said she knew whose it should be," he said finally. "She didn't explain more than that. Solveig never explained more than necessary." Dwin looked down at the coffee. It was weak as advertised. but it was hot and she was cold down to a level she hadn't fully acknowledged until now, the deep cold that had settled in during the walk up the road and the standing in the snow, looking at impossible flowers. "There's something else," she said. "She told the attorney to give me a coin with 4 numbers on it." Petter was quiet for a moment. 1965, he said. "You know about it." "I know about the coin. I don't know what the numbers mean. She gave it to Muse a year before she passed, said someone would come and would need it." He looked at her steadily. "She seemed to think you'd figure it out." Dwin touched the coat lining without thinking, felt the small hard circle of the coin through the cloth. "I don't know anything," she said. "I don't know why she chose me. I don't know who she was to me or who I am to her. I've never been here before. I didn't know this town existed." "No," Petter said. "You wouldn't have." There was something in his voice, not quite a secret, the shape of a secret, the space around something that hadn't been said. "What does that mean?" He looked down at his hands. The knuckles were swollen, the skin on them cracked from cold and decades of work. A man's hands that had spent their life being useful. "It means," he said slowly, "that there are some things about this lodge and this family that have been kept quiet for a very long time, and I think the reason Solveig sent for you is that she believed the quiet had gone on long enough." He lifted his coffee, drank, set it down. "But I'm not the right one to tell you those things. The lodge will show you." That's how she put it. "The lodge will show whoever comes. Let it work in its own time." Outside, the wind moved through the pines. Inside, the kitchen was warm and amber and smelled of coffee and old wood and the faint ghost of marigolds. Dwin wrapped her hands around the chipped mug. She thought, "I don't know anything. I have $2 and a coin and a coat that belonged to a stranger, and I am sitting in the kitchen of a lodge I inherited from a woman I never met on a mountain in a town I'd never heard of 3 days ago. She thought I have been sleeping on a folding table for 11 days. She thought the lamp on the porch was lit." "Okay," she said aloud. Peter looked at her. "Okay," she said again. "Show me the rooms." He showed her room 7. It was on the 2nd floor at the end of the hall, the last door before the window that looked out over the east side of the mountain. The room was cold in the way all the rooms were cold. A single bed with a quilt that had been washed recently. She could smell it, the clean cotton smell. A small fireplace, the hearth clean and ready logs already laid. A writing desk by the window, the kind of desk a person sat at to think rather than to work. On the mantel above the fireplace, a clock, brass case, round face, the kind called a carriage clock, the sort that sat on mantels in houses that had histories. It was ticking. The tick was soft and regular, and she realized she hadn't heard a clock tick in months, and the sound of it filled some small cold space in her chest that she hadn't known was empty. She set her bag down. Petter lit the fire. It took immediately. The wood was dry, the chimney clear, the fire building fast and warm and orange. He showed her how the radiator worked. Knock twice, then wait, then it would heat, and showed her which floorboard near the window was soft and told her to step right, and then he left her to it. She stood in room 7 and listened to the fire and the clock and the wind outside and the distant sound of the pines, and she thought, "This is the first room I have been alone in since October. The first room that was warm. The first place in 4 months where no one could come through the door without her choosing to open it." She sat on the bed, took the coin out of the coat lining, held it. 1965. She looked around the room, at the mantel, at the clock. She got up, crossed to the fireplace. She lifted the clock carefully. It was heavier than she expected, and turned it over. On the bottom beneath the case, nothing. She turned it to face her again and looked at the back panel, and there in the lower right corner of the brass backing, stamped into the metal in small, neat numbers, a maker's mark, a serial number, and below those, made 1965. She set the clock back down very carefully. She stood in front of it and looked at it for a long time, the coin in her hand, the clock on the mantel, both from the same year, both connected to Solveig, who had left her a note that said, "The coin will tell you when," and a letter that said she kept this place for someone, and a drawer full of silence where explanations should have been. The letter had mentioned a sister, just that a sister unnamed somewhere, the sentence incomplete, the way important sentences sometimes were when the writer ran out of courage before they ran out of paper. Dwin had read the letter 4 times on the bus, and each time the sister felt more like the center of the thing and less like a detail. The clock ticked. The fire popped. She put the coin in her pocket this time, not the lining, her pocket, where she could feel it. She lay down on the bed with her coat still on, and the fire going, and the clock ticking, and she looked at the ceiling, which had a water stain in the shape of nothing in particular, and she thought, okay, 1 foot. She was asleep in 7 minutes. She woke to voices downstairs, not alarming voices, the kitchen voice, the clink of mug, scrape of chair, ordinary morning voice that she had forgotten the sound of. She lay still for a moment, just listening to it, the way you listen to a sound when you're not sure yet if you're dreaming. She wasn't dreaming. She got up, washed her face in the cold water sink in the hall bathroom, came downstairs. Peter was at the stove, back to her, and there was a woman at the kitchen table. 50s, maybe close to 60, round face, dark hair starting to go silver, at the temples, wearing an apron over a heavy sweater. She had a basket on the table in front of her, and she was setting things out of it, a covered pot, still steaming bread wrapped in a cloth, a small jar of something amber, a tin of something Dwin couldn't identify yet. She looked up when Dwin came in. "Sit down," she said, not unkind, the way you say sit down when you are a person who has been feeding people for a long time and it has become less an offer than a fact about the universe. "I'm Clova Wend. I run the bakery in town. I was a friend of Solveig's, which in Solveig's case meant I brought her food and she tolerated it." She uncovered the pot, soup white bean, and something green and fragrant. "She never let anyone leave this kitchen hungry," Clova said, setting a bowl in front of the empty chair in a way that made clear the empty chair was for Dwin. "I don't plan to start now." Dwin sat. She had been going to say something like, "I can't accept this," or "you don't have to," or any of the other things people said when they had been managing alone long enough that kindness felt like a test. She had been going to say that. She didn't. She sat. She pulled the bowl toward her. She ate. The soup was the best thing she had tasted in 4 months, which was not an exaggeration. It was warm and thick, and there was bread, and the amber stuff in the jar turned out to be honey, and she ate 2 bowls and 3 slices of bread and did not apologize for any of it, and Clova refilled her bowl without commentary, and Petter sat across from her with his weak coffee, and nobody said anything much at all. This was the first time in 19 years that someone had fed her without needing something back. She did not cry. She was not going to cry over soup, no matter how good it was, no matter how it felt, like being put back together 1 spoonful at a time. She was not. Her eyes were just watering from the steam. "Solveig talked about you," Clova said. Dwin looked up. "Not by name. She didn't have your name." Clova wrapped her hands around her own mug. "But in the last year, she talked about someone she was expecting, someone who would come and understand what needed to be done. She was very specific about one thing." "What thing?" "She said send for someone who knows how to listen to a house." Dwin thought about the floor in room 9, soft at the left side of the window. She thought about the folding table between the 3rd and 4th dryers. She thought about the night she had spent at the laundromat listening to the machines and learning which one threw the most heat. "What does she mean?" Dwayne said. "A sister." Peter set his mug down. Clova looked at him. "Solveig had a sister," Peter said, "older by 3 years. Her name was Idris." The name sat in the kitchen the way names sit when they have been kept in a drawer for a long time and finally been brought out. Heavy, a little stiff, like something that needed to be handled carefully. "She's gone. We don't know." Clova's voice was careful, the voice of someone choosing words with the precision of someone who had carried the wrong words before. "She was sent away when she was young. The family—" She stopped, started again. "There was a place called Harwood. It's closed now, a facility for women they didn't know what else to do with." A pause. "Idris was 22 when they sent her, in 1963, and Solveig spent the next 40 years writing her letters. But we don't know if the letters ever arrived." Clova looked at her very steadily. "We don't know where Idris is now. We don't know if she's alive. We know Solveig believed she was. She believed it the way she believed the marigolds would come back, not with proof, just with the particular faith of someone who has loved something long enough to trust it." Dwayne looked down at her empty bowl. The coin was in her coat pocket. She could feel it against her hip. 1965. Outside the kitchen window, the morning light was coming in thin and clear and very cold off the mountain, and the marigolds along the porch were glowing in it, orange and gold and copper, stubborn and impossible, and right there. She did not know how to find a woman who had been missing for 60 years. She had $2. She did not have a car. She did not have a plan, a strategy, a legal background, a family connection, or any particular reason to believe that she specifically was the right person to do whatever this was. But she thought about her mother's voice. "You don't eat the whole mountain. 1 foot." "Okay," she said. For the 3rd time in 12 hours, it had become a kind of practice, she realized. The practice of someone who did not know the next step but had decided to take it anyway. Clova looked at her. Something in the older woman's face shifted, not exactly a smile, but the thing that lives near a smile. Warmth, recognition, the look of someone watching a thing begin. "Okay," Clova said, and then the knock at the front door. Not a polite knock. The knock of someone who had practiced knocking on doors and knew that the sound a knock made told you something about the person making it, and who had decided at some point that they wanted their knock to say, "I am already inside. You simply haven't opened the door yet." 3 knocks. Even. Deliberate. Peter did not move. Dwayne looked at him. "That," he said, his voice going very quiet and very flat, "will be Lexton Grant." And something in the kitchen changed. Not dramatically, not the way things change in movies where the music shifted and the light went cold. Just a small change in the quality of the air, the way the air changes when you have been sitting by a warm fire and someone opens a door somewhere in the house. She felt it. She looked at Peter. She looked at Clova. She got up from the kitchen table and walked to the front door of the lodge that she apparently now owned, and she put her hand on the knob and she opened it. The man on the porch was 49, maybe 50. Dark coat, good coat, the kind with a structured collar and buttons that meant it had been chosen rather than grabbed. A leather case under one arm, the kind that held documents. He was not tall, but he stood the way tall people stood, maximizing his footprint, using the porch steps to put himself slightly above her eye line. He looked at her the way people look when they have already decided what they are seeing. "Lexton Grant," he said. His voice was the boardroom version of his knock. Precise, pre-settled. "I represent the Grant family estate, and I believe we have a property matter to discuss." He had papers in the leather case. She could see the edge of them, official-looking, thick, the kind of papers that people use to make things feel decided before any conversation had started. He waited for her to step back, to invite him in, to shrink. Dwin stood in the doorway of the lodge she had slept in for one night after an 11-day stretch, on a laundromat folding table with $2 in her coat lining and a coin she didn't fully understand, and soup still warm in her stomach and the smell of marigolds behind her. She did not step back. "Miss Farley," he said, and she heard it in the way he used her name, that he already knew it, that he had already done the research, that she was already a managed variable in a plan that had started before she got on the bus. "This property legally reverts to the Grant estate. That means it reverts to me. You're welcome to review the documentation." He said it the way you say something when you expect it to be over, when you expect the other person to take the out you've offered them and be grateful for it. Behind her, the marigolds were on the porch. The clock was ticking upstairs. The coin was in her pocket. The coin will tell you when. She didn't know what that meant yet. She didn't know a lot of things yet. But she was standing in the doorway, and she was not moving. She did not let him in. That was the first thing, the thing that mattered, because Lexton Grant was the kind of man who had spent 30 years walking into rooms and having people move out of his way. And he was standing on the porch with his leather case and his good coat and his pre-settled expression, and he was waiting for Dwin Farley, 19 years old, $2, still had soup on her breath, to step aside. She didn't. "I'd like to see the documentation," she said. Not, "I'm sorry, I don't understand." Not, "Of course, please come in." Just that. Flat and quiet and taking up exactly the space it needed to take up. Something moved across Lexton's face. Not surprise exactly, more like the recalibration of a man who had prepared for one kind of conversation and found himself in a different one. He opened the leather case, extracted 3 pages stapled, held them out. She took them, read them, standing in the doorway. She was not a lawyer. She had finished high school barely through the years of her mother's illness and the chaos after, and she had 1 semester of community college before the money ran out. She was not equipped to parse legal language, but she was very good at reading the shape of things. And the shape of this document was, "We are telling you this is decided. We are telling you the deciding happened before you arrived. We are presenting this as information rather than argument, because argument implies the other party has a position." She read to the end, handed the pages back. "I'll need to speak with the attorney who handled the transfer," she said, "Garrett, Muse, and Caldwell." "Of course." Smooth, prepared. "His office will confirm what I'm telling you. The 1971 Family Trust supersedes any individual transfer. I'm not here to make this difficult, Miss Farley. I'm offering you a reasonable exit before this becomes a legal matter." Before this becomes a legal matter, as if it weren't already. "I'll be in touch," Dwin said, and she closed the door. She stood in the lobby with her back against the closed door and counted to 5. Petter appeared in the kitchen doorway. "He's going to his car," Dwin said. "He's writing something down on his phone." "He does that." Peter said it without surprise, which meant he had seen Lexton Grant before, on this porch, at this door. He's been here before, twice, in the 2 years since Solveig passed. He came into the lobby, set his mug on the reception desk. The first time the lodge was empty, and he got as far as the back office before I found him. The second time I was already on the porch when he pulled up. He left faster that time. What's he looking for? Peter was quiet for a moment, the careful quiet of a man who had held things back for a long time and was deciding again how much to release. I think, he said, he's looking for a reason the lodge is worth having, which means there's something here he doesn't know about and can't find. Dwin thought about the guest register, the date 1961 and the 2 words, to find. She thought about the floorboard in room 4, because she hadn't checked room 4 yet. She had gone to 7. 7 was hers, or the lodge had decided it was hers the way rooms in old buildings have a way of claiming people without being asked. But room 4, she looked at the key hooks behind the desk. Hook number 4 still held its key. Garrett mused when she called from the kitchen telephone, a wall phone rotary which she had not used in her life, but figured out in approximately 45 seconds, because it turned out rotary phones were not complicated, just slow. Garrett Muse said yes. He was aware of Lexington Grant. Yes, he had been expecting this. No, the situation was not as simple as Mr. Grant's documents suggested. And yes, she had grounds to contest. But contesting a trust provision takes time, he said. His voice was careful and specific, the voice of a man who gave people exactly the information they needed, and no more, because more often made things worse. And it takes a retainer, Miss Farley, which I understand may be. I have $2, Dwin said. A pause. I see. Is there another way? Another pause. Longer. There may be, Muse said, if we can establish that the 1971 trust was predated by a more specific conveyance, a deed, a transfer document, anything that explicitly named an individual beneficiary with prior claim that would change the picture considerably. A properly recorded deed is a powerful document. Trusts built after the fact, without acknowledging an existing deed, are on uncertain ground. What would I be looking for? A deed filed before 1971, naming a specific individual as owner of this property. A pause. Ms. Farley, did Solveig leave you anything other than the letter? Any other documents, objects, anything at all? A coin, Dwin said, with the year 1965 on it. Silence. 1965, Muse said slowly. That would be 6 years before the family trust. That would be. He stopped. Look in the lodge, Ms. Farley. Look carefully. Solveig was not a woman who did things without reason. She hung up. She stood in the kitchen, and then she went to room 4. Room 4 was on the second floor, east side, the smallest of the guest rooms, not cramped, but intimate. The ceiling lower here, the window looking out over the north slope of the mountain and the edge of the marigold garden below. It smelled different from the other rooms. Not musty, not cold clothes, something else, like the room had been used more recently than the rest of the lodge, like someone had been in it, not as a guest, not passing through but sitting, being present. The furniture was simple, a single bed, a small dresser, a chair by the window positioned to look out at the mountain, and on the sill a row of small objects, pine cones, a piece of quartz, a pressed flower under a glass circle, arranged with the deliberate care of someone who had few things and valued all of them. Dwin stood in the center of the room. She didn't know what she was looking for. That was fine. She had learned in 11 days of sleeping on a folding table that you didn't always need to know what you were looking for. Sometimes you just had to be present in a space long enough for the space to show you. She did what she always did. She knocked, walked the perimeter of the room, knuckles against the wall, listening. The sound changed near the northwest corner, not hollow exactly, but different, a resonance, like the wall was thicker there than it should have been. She pressed, nothing moved. She knocked the floor, around the bed, along the wall, near the window, and there, near the window, just off center to the right. The sound was different, not the flat thud of wood over subfloor, something underneath, space. She got on her knees. The floorboard was nailed like the others, but the nails were slightly newer, the color of the nail heads brighter than the surrounding boards, like they had been reset at some point, like someone had lifted the board and put it back. She went to get Peder's flat pry bar from the toolkit in the kitchen closet. 3 boards came up. Underneath a wooden box, not a chest, not a crate. A careful box, the kind a person builds themselves with good lumber and attention to the joints, the kind that is made to last rather than to impress. The wood was cedar. It smelled like the lodge's own air, but more concentrated, deeper, older, the smell of intention. She lifted it out, set it on the floor, opened it. Inside, a cloth bag, canvas tied at the top, and an envelope, a different envelope from the attorney's older, the paper yellowed at the edges, sealed with the careful attention of someone who had written it a long time ago and expected it to wait. She opened the bag first. The money was in banded stacks, 50s and 100s, the bands written in pencil in a small, clear hand. Winter 85, summer 87, W 89, W 91, and so on. 40 years of winters, 40 years of careful, unspent accumulation. She counted it on the floor, stack by stack, the numbers adding up with the slow inevitability of 40 years of a woman who did not spend what she did not need. 28,600. She sat back on her heels and looked at the stacks on the floor of room 4 of Veldon Crossing Lodge at the top of a Montana mountain in December and thought, this is what 40 years of choosing the mountain over everything else looks like. This is what it looks like when a person strips their life down to what matters and keeps the rest. Then she opened the envelope from the box. This was not the attorney's letter. This was something different, longer, older, written in a hand that had spent 40 years finding its purpose and knew exactly what it wanted to say. The letter of Solveig Grant was 3 pages handwritten, the penmanship of a woman who had learned to write carefully because she had spent most of her life in a place where everything she wrote was the only version of herself that traveled beyond the mountain. My name is Solveig Grant. I have kept this lodge since the winter of 1983. I came here in a truck with 2 boxes of tools and a chainsaw, and I did not leave for 40 years. I kept it because the mountain does not ask questions. When I arrived, I needed a place that would not ask me to explain what I had survived or what I was afraid of or why I preferred the company of timber and stone to the company of most people I had met. The mountain did not ask. I stayed. The money is what 40 winters look like when you do not spend what you do not need. There were years I could have used it. I did not. I was keeping it. A word about the practical things. The west boiler knocks before it warms. Let it knock. It always warms. The spring is 160 feet north. Past the woodpile, there is a flat stone that marks it gray. With 1 white stripe, you will not miss it. The floor in room 9 is soft at the left side of the window. Step right, always step right. The chimney in the east suite draws better if you open the hall window 2 inches first. These are small things, but the small things are the ones that matter when you are trying to keep a large thing alive. I am telling you about the practical things because I want you to understand that what I am leaving you is not a symbolic gesture. It is a working property. It will need work. It will need someone who is willing to learn what it needs and do what it asks. I believe you are that person. I cannot tell you why I believe this because the reasons are not the kind that translate into language. They are the kind you know when you know. There is a sister. Her name is Idris. She is 3 years older than me, which makes her 83 if she is still living, which I believe she is. I have no proof of this. I believe it the way I believe the marigolds will come back. I have been wrong before about things I believed without proof. I am prepared to be wrong about this, but I do not think I am. She was sent away in 1963. I was 19 and could not stop it, and I have spent 60 years living in the space that created. She was sent to a place called Harwood Institute, outside of Missoula, which closed in 1981. I do not know where she went after. I wrote to every place I could find. Most letters were returned. Some were not returned, which I took as a sign that someone received them. though no one ever wrote back. I kept this lodge for her. I kept it because it was the only thing I could do, because I could not find her, because every time I tried, the doors were closed, the records were sealed, the trail went cold, so I stayed here, and I kept the place that was hers by right, and I tended her garden, and I kept the lamp burning. The coin. The numbers are 1965. There is a deed filed that year, with the county naming Idris Grant as sole owner of this property. The deed predates the family trust by 6 years. Our father signed it. He was not a kind man, and he did not do many right things, but he did that one. Maybe he knew by 1965 what the family was planning. Maybe he wanted to leave her something that could not be taken. I do not know his reasons. I only know the deed exists. Find it. Find her. Bring her home. The house has been keeping. That is all I ever told anyone when they asked. The house is keeping. I meant it the way a person means it when they have left a candle burning in a window for someone who is a long way off and they do not know if the person can still see the light, but the candle is still lit, and I believe she can. I hope this gives you somewhere to stand. I hope it gives you more than that. Solveig Grant, August 3rd, 2021. Dwin sat on the floor of room 4 for a long time after she finished reading, not crying. She was not a crier. Her mother had not been a crier. It was a family trait, she supposed, though she only had one data point. The feeling was there, large and complicated, and pressing in from all sides, but it did not come out as tears. It came out as stillness, as the kind of absolute quiet that happens when something has moved in you so completely that everything else stops to make room. A sister, still alive maybe, 83 years old, somewhere in Montana, a deed filed in 1965, a coin with the year on it. The coin will tell you when to look, when to use it, when the deed mattered. Now. The deed mattered now. She came downstairs with the letter and the coin and the money. She had put it back in the box and brought the box, and she set everything on the kitchen table, and Petter looked at it and then looked at her, and something in his face went very still and then very open, like a door. She told you, he said, about Idris, about the deed. She sat down. Did you know about the sister, not the deed? He sat down across from her, set his hands flat on the table. Solveig mentioned Idris once, in the early years before she stopped talking about before. She said I had a sister, and I said what happened to her, and she said they decided she was too much, and I said too much what? And she said, he stopped, breathed. She said too much of everything she actually was. Too much of everything she actually was. Dwin looked at the letter. I need to find the deed, she said, and I need to find Idris. The county office in Caldwell would have the deed. If it was filed in 1965, it should be on record. And Idris, Petter looked down at the table. There's someone, he said, in town. She knew Idris when they were children, when Idris was still here. She's been here a long time. A pause. Her name is Zora Streck. She taught school here for 30 years. She doesn't talk about the past much. But she might talk to me. I think, Petter said carefully, that she's been waiting to talk to someone for a long time. She just needed the right someone to show up. Zora Streck lived 3 streets back from the main road in a house that had the organized quiet of a person who had spent decades teaching other people's children to think clearly and had applied the same discipline to her own living space. Books in rows, a wood stove burning low, plants in every window green and thriving in the December gray. She was 69, silver-haired, short, with the particular directness of someone who had taught 30 years of 12-year-olds and long ago stopped having patience for indirection. She opened the door before Dwin knocked. Peter called, she said. Come in. I've been thinking about what to say since he hung up, and I think the answer is everything. I'm 89 years old. 69, Dwyn said. I feel 89. The point is, I am tired of keeping this particular thing. Sit down. I'll make tea. Dwyn sat. The kitchen was warm, smelled of black tea and something baked, sweet and yeasty. On the wall above the table, a child's drawing, a house with improbably orange flowers around it, crayon on notebook paper, framed with the reverence of something a person has kept for a very long time. Dwyn looked at the drawing. Did you keep that? She said, because a child gave it to you or because of the flowers? Zora turned from the stove, looked at the drawing. Both, she said. Idris drew it. She was 11. She was very specific about the flowers. She said orange was the color that meant something good was coming. She set the kettle on. She was the smartest child I have ever known, and I taught school here for 30 years. I know what smart looks like. Idris wasn't just smart the way children who read a lot are smart. She was the kind of smart that has its own grammar, that sees the world in a structure other people can't quite perceive. And the family called it wrong. The word came out flat and cold and final. They called her strange. They called her too much. They called her difficult because she asked questions that didn't have convenient answers, and she remembered everything with a precision that made people uncomfortable, and she talked to the marigolds in a way that was, I will tell you, perfectly reasonable if you understood that she was observing them, recording. She kept a journal of when each one bloomed, what the weather was, how much the soil had changed. She poured hot water over the tea. They called it obsession. I called it science. I was 11. Nobody listened to me. The tea came out dark and strong. Zora set a mug in front of Dwyn. She was sent away in 1963. I was 9. She was 22. They said she was going somewhere she would be cared for. Her voice was very steady and very dry, the voice of someone who has said a sentence 100 times in her head and long since burned off all the emotion that was once attached to it. The place they sent her, Harwood Institute, it wasn't a hospital. It was a facility for women they didn't know what else to do with. Women who asked too many questions. Women who didn't fit the shape of what was expected. Dwyn held her mug. Solveig kept writing to her. Every month, for 40 years. Zora looked out the window. I know because Solveig showed me the letters. Not the letters she received. She never received any. The letters she sent. She kept copies, a whole drawer of them. Every month the same thing. I am here. The house is keeping. The flowers came back. I am waiting. Did any of them get through? Zora was quiet for a moment. That, she said, is what I need to show you. She brought out a shoebox. Old, the cardboard gone soft at the corners, the original contents long since replaced. Inside a stack of envelopes, 47 of them, held together with a rubber band gone brittle. Solveig gave me this box 6 months before she died, Zora said. She said if someone comes who is looking for Idris, give them this. Dwyn looked at the envelopes. The addresses on the front were Solveig's handwriting, different addresses, a series of them over the decades, each one presumably a new facility or forwarding address Solveig had tracked down through some laborious process of letters and phone calls and probably driving to offices that had given her nothing. The addresses changed. The handwriting on the envelope stayed the same. Careful, patient, unmistakably the hand of a woman who had decided that the writing mattered regardless of whether it arrived. But the envelopes had been returned, stamped, and on every one refused return to sender, which was not Dwyn noticed the same as undeliverable, not addressee unknown, not no such address. Refuse. The stamp was deliberate. The word was deliberate. Someone had looked at these envelopes and chosen that word. Someone had decided to send them back rather than forward them, rather than hold them, rather than let them reach the person they were addressed to. She turned the oldest one over. The postmark, 1964, and on the back flap, not Solvieg's writing, different ink, a signature half smeared, old enough to have faded, but not old enough to be gone entirely. B. Grant, Barnett Grant, Lexton Grant's father. Dwin sat very still. He intercepted them, she said. Lexton's father. He sent them back. Yes. Zora's voice was very quiet. I believe so. Which means Idris, if she is alive, spent 60 years believing her sister never wrote, and Solvieg spent 60 years believing Idris chose not to answer. The kitchen was absolutely silent. Dwin thought about two women, each one riding into a silence the other was experiencing as abandonment, each one alone on her side of a gap that had been manufactured by a man with a pen and a rubber stamp and the specific cruelty of someone who understood that information was power and silence was a weapon. She thought about the marigolds, tended for 40 years, because what else could you do when you could not reach the person, but you could tend the things she had planted? She thought about the lamp. Every night, every single night. Idris is alive, Dwin said. Not a question. I don't know, Zora said. She is. Dwin set the envelope down. Solvieg believed it, not because she had proof, because of what she knew about Idris. And I think she stopped. Something was forming that she didn't have full language for yet. I think someone who plants a garden when they're 12 years old and labels every bloom with the date and the weather and the soil conditions, I think that person doesn't disappear. That person keeps records. That person's whole life is a record. You don't lose a record like that. Zora looked at her for a long moment. You sound like her, she said quietly. Not Solvieg, Idris. And then she looked away out the window. Find the deed. That's the first thing, because until you have the deed, you don't have the lodge. And without the lodge, there's nothing to bring her back to. Yes, the county office in Caldwell was a 2-hour drive, which was a problem, because Dwin did not have a car. This was the moment she would think about it later, when she fully understood what Peter had meant about the town, about small places having a body, about organs you couldn't see that kept things alive, because she went back to the lodge and she told Peter, and he picked up his phone, and 15 minutes later, a young man arrived in a truck the color of old rust, tall, broad across the shoulders, the kind of quietness that suggested someone who had grown up working outdoors and had organized his relationship with language accordingly economical. He knocked twice on the door frame, which was also the greeting. This is Torben, Peter said. My nephew's boy. He knows the roads. I know the roads, Torben said, as if confirming a fact about geography rather than offering a service. Can you drive me to Caldwell? He looked at her, then at Peter, then back. Weather's fine until 3, he said. We should leave now. They left now. The drive to Caldwell was 2 hours of mountain road, snow-packed on the curves, clear in the straightaways, where the wind kept things dry. Torben drove the way Petter had said he knew the roads, like the road was a thing he had memorized rather than a thing he was reading in real time. He didn't overcorrect. He didn't brake early. He just drove hand-steady, watching the white ahead of them. Dwin sat in the passenger seat and held the coin. They didn't talk much. This was fine with her. She had grown up or become who she was, which was not the same as growing up in the kind of silence that was either hostile or companionable, and she had learned the difference quickly because one of them was dangerous. This was companionable, the kind of silence that was its own conversation. Did you know Solvieg? She said around the first hour. Some. She came to town sometimes, not often. A pause. She brought things, vegetables from the garden, wood she'd split more than she needed. She didn't stay for conversation. She'd drop the things and leave. Did she seem fine, he said. She always seemed fine. that kind of find that takes a lot of work. Dwyn understood that. She looked out the window at the mountains. She left this place to a 19-year-old stranger, she said, not really to him, more out loud. Yeah, that doesn't strike you as strange. He was quiet for a moment, considering. Petter said she always did things with a reason, he said, even when the reason wasn't visible yet. Another pause. He said she left the lamp on every night for 3 years after she could barely get around. That's not nothing. It wasn't nothing. The county office in Caldwell was a low brick building with fluorescent lights and the smell of decades of paper. The clerk was a woman in her 50s named, according to her name badge, Dottie, which was a name Dwyn had not encountered on a living person before, but seemed to fit perfectly because she had the practical warmth of someone who had processed 40 years of other people's important documents and had come to understand that what looked like bureaucracy was actually the record of human life. Deed search, Dwyn said. Veldon Crossing Lodge, filed 1965, Garfield County. Dottie typed, slowly, deliberately. You got a name on the deed, Grant, Idris Grant. More typing, a pause, a longer pause. Said Dottie, which was not sorry nothing. It was the particular HM of someone who had found something unexpected. There is a deed, she said, filed June 12, 1965, Grant family property, Veldon Township. The named owner of record is, she squinted at the screen, Idris Mirabel Grant. Dwyn's hand tightened on the counter. That deed, she said carefully, is it active? Has it been superseded by anything? Dottie read, scrolled, read some more. As far as our records show, she said, no subsequent deed was filed for this property. There are tax records, maintenance filings, a trust document from 1971, but that's a family trust, not a property deed. The deed itself, she looked up. The deed of record for Veldon Crossing Lodge names Idris Mirabel Grant as owner. That's what the county has. Dwyn breathed, just breathed. I need a certified copy, she said. She had the copy in her hand when they walked back to the truck. Torben looked at her face and read whatever was written there and said nothing, just opened the truck door. She got in. He got in. He started the engine. He looked at her. You found it. I found it. He pulled out of the parking lot, and then because she needed to say it out loud to make it real, because that was how things became real for her, had always been. You said them in the air, and then they existed outside of you, and you couldn't take them back. The deed is in Idris's name, she said. 1965, filed 6 years before the family trust. Lexton Grant's whole claim is built on a document that came after. Torben was quiet. Then, so he's wrong, or he knew. That landed. Because the 5th chimney was where the Breckenridge house used to be, and the Breckenridge house had been one of the oldest wood frame structures in the valley, built in 1871, before most of the boom money arrived, built fast and cheap, with green timber that had never fully dried, and walls that had been patched and repatched every winter since. She found the chimney. She started digging. Except the first cut of her spade went through not just snow, but snow and rotten wood, which meant the roof had come down, not partially, completely. The snow had simply pressed down through the aged timber until the timber stopped pretending it could hold anything. She stopped. She thought. She knew by the time she got back to the lodge. It was from a law firm in Billings, not Lexton's firm, but a larger one, the kind that existed in a different category from anything Garrett Muse operated in, the kind with the floor of a building. The letter was 6 paragraphs, legal language, dense, but the shape was clear. She probed the snow at intervals with the spade handle, looking for the particular resistance pattern that meant debris rather than solid snow, which meant structure, which meant cavity, which meant there, northeast corner. The spade handle dropped 6 inches further than it should have at a point she estimated was above the original kitchen corner. Kitchens were often the last room standing. She had learned that yesterday. She dug carefully. The wrong cut in the wrong place could shift what remained of the structure. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of the most careful, methodical, agonizing excavation she had ever performed. But she found them, all 5, huddled in the northeast corner of what had been their kitchen, which was now a space approximately the size of a wardrobe in near total darkness, in a cold so profound that the eldest daughter's eyebrows were frosted white. They came out blinking. The marigolds were right there, orange and gold and impossibly alive. She looked at them for a long time. They were claiming the money Solveig had left her, the money that was 40 years of a woman's life compressed into stacked bills in a cedar box under the floor. They were claiming it. She could fight it, maybe, with Garrett Muse, who was one attorney in a small town, against a firm in Billings with the floor of a building, with no money for a retainer, with a deed that was now being called fraudulent. And underneath all of that, underneath the logistics and the legal threat and the weight of what she was about to try to navigate alone at 19, underneath it all, was the thing she kept coming back to. They had done this before. Barnett Grant, Lexton Grant, father to son, the interception of letters, the returned envelopes, the isolation of a woman for 60 years, the family trusts assembled after the fact to cover over what had been done, and now this, the suit, the claim, the document designed to look like law while being underneath the same thing it had always been. We are telling you it's decided. We are telling you the deciding happened before you arrived. She sat on the step for a long time. The cold was real. The coin was in her pocket. The certified copy of the deed was inside on the kitchen table. She thought about Solveig, living here for 40 years, sending letters that never arrived, tending the garden of a woman who didn't know the garden existed, keeping the lamp lit every night for a person she could not reach, not because she was sure it would work, because it was the right thing, because some things you did not, because you would win, but because the alternative was stopping, and stopping was not something Solveig Grant had known how to do. Dwyn picked up the coin, turned it over. 1965. She stood up. She went inside. She called Garrett Muse. The next morning, Rufus Blaine showed up at the lodge. She hadn't called him. She didn't know him. He was 61, broad in the chest, wearing coveralls over a flannel shirt, carrying a tool bag that had been used so long the canvas had softened to the consistency of heavy cloth. Heard you had a pipe situation in the East Wing, he said. She had not told anyone about the pipe situation. She had noticed it herself 2 days ago, a groaning in the east wall that suggested something in the heating system was not right. Word gets around, she said. In Veldon it does. He set the bag down inside the door. Solveig kept my daughter's house from burning down in the winter of 2014 when the chimney went. She drove over at 11 at night. She never charged anything. I owed her. He picked up the bag again and looked at her. I'm going to look at your East Wing now. He went to the East Wing. She let him. This was the thing about Veldon. The thing she was learning. It did not announce itself. It did not make offers. It simply appeared when it was needed and did the thing that was needed and did not require discussion about it. He fixed the pipe. He checked the boiler. He showed her how to bleed the radiator valves in the right order. He refused when she tried to give him the $20 she had cadged from Garrett Muse as a small advance on the estate paperwork. He refused it with a gentleness that made the refusal feel less like a rejection and more like a gift. Solveig, fix my daughter's house, he said again. Consider this debt paid sideways. He left. She stood in the east wing with warm radiators ticking around her. Paid sideways. She thought about that. Zora came at 3 that afternoon. She came because Dwin had called her, because Dwin had spent the morning on the phone with Garrett Muse going through the lawsuit and the counter-arguments and the timeline and the deed and the trust, and at the end of it, she had said, I need to know where Idris went when Harwood closed. And Muse had said, try the records office, and then had paused and said, try the people first. So she called Zora. Zora came in, hung up her coat, sat down, and looked at Dwin the way you look at someone who is about to ask you to give them something that has been locked up for 60 years. Harwood closed in 1981, Zora said. I know that because I tried to find her. After Solveig told me about the letters, she thought, I was in my late 20s. I thought I would just look her up. It couldn't be that hard. A pause that contained a whole education. It was that hard. Harwood's records went to the state when it closed. The state archived them. The archive was at that time not digitized. I wrote 3 letters. I got 1 response saying the records were sealed. I stopped. But you were braver then. Zora looked at her. I was younger, she said. Not the same thing. Did you ever hear the name Pinecrest, as in a place where patients might have been transferred? Zora went very still. Where did you get that name? Muse. He said when Harwood closed, most long-term residents were transferred to state-contracted facilities in western Montana. Pinecrest Home was one of them. Zora was looking at her with an expression Dwin could not immediately read. I drove past a place by that name, she said slowly. Once, in 1989, I didn't go in. I told myself I didn't have proof she was there. I told myself, she stopped. I told myself a lot of things. And then very quietly, Solveig never knew I'd done that. I never told her. The kitchen was still. I'm going to call them, Dwin said. She got up, went to the kitchen phone, dialed the number Muse had given her. 3 rings, a voice, careful, professional. Pinecrest Home, how can I help you? Dwin looked at Zora. Zora was not looking at her. She was looking at the child's drawing on the wall, the house with the orange flowers, the flowers that meant something good was coming. My name is Dwin Farley, Dwin said. I'm calling about a resident, Idris Mirabel Grount. I believe she may have been a long-term resident since approximately 1981. I'm calling because her sister kept a lodge for her for 40 years, and I need to know if she's still there. Silence on the line. A longer silence, then, can you hold for a moment, please? Music, quiet and tinny, and entirely wrong for this moment. Dwin stood at the kitchen phone and looked at the window and watched the marigolds outside, moving very slightly in the mountain wind, the orange heads tipping and righting and tipping again. Zora's chair scraped back. She came to stand beside Dwin, not touching her, just near. The hold music played, and then it stopped. Ms. Farley. The voice was different now, not the professional intake voice, something more careful, more considered. Miss Grant is a resident here. She has been with us since 1989. A pause. I have to tell you she has not accepted visitors in many years. She has not opened her mail. She has not taken calls. I know, Dwin said. I know she hasn't, but I need you to give her a message. Just one, and then whatever she decides, that's what I'll do. What's the message? Dwin looked at the marigolds, at the lamp burning on the porch in the middle of the afternoon because Petter had turned it on that morning and she had not turned it off. Tell her her sister kept the lodge. The flowers came back. The lamp has been on every night for 40 years, and someone is here who wants to bring her home. Silence. I'll pass that along, the voice said. She may not respond. I know. It could be days, or she may not. "I'll wait," Dwayne said. "I'm good at that." She hung up. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the wind moved through the marigolds. One of them, the tallest one, the one that had pushed up highest through the snow, bent and then righted itself, stubborn, certain, as if it had decided a long time ago that it was not going anywhere. Dwayne stood at the window and looked at it. The phone didn't ring that night, or the next morning. Dwayne told herself this was fine. She told herself Idris was 83 years old and had not spoken to a stranger in decades, and a single message from a voice on a telephone was not going to undo 60 years of silence in 24 hours. She told herself to be patient, to be reasonable, to remember that she was 19 and had no idea what she was doing, and reasonable people accepted uncertainty. She was very bad at accepting uncertainty. She cleaned the lodge, top to bottom. Not because it needed it. Peter's steady weeks of Wednesdays had kept it from true neglect, but because her hands needed something, and cleaning was the kind of work that let the mind run while the body stayed occupied. She swept the lobby. She wiped down the reception desk. She oiled the brass key hooks with a cloth she found in the kitchen, and they came up gleaming. 12 hooks, 3 keys, and the one she had moved number 4 now back in its place because the room it belonged to was not hers to claim. Number 4 was Idris's room, had always been Idris's room. She understood that now. The objects on the sill, the pine cones, the quartz, the pressed flower under glass, those were Solviegg's objects, placed there as a kind of keeping, the things you set out for someone who isn't there yet. Dwayne did not move them. She cleaned around them the way you clean around something that matters. The second morning, she called Garrett Muse. The court petition from the Billings firm had a response deadline of 30 days. Muse had filed a preliminary objection citing the 1965 deed as the operative document. The objection bought them time, but not certainty. The Billings firm had resources she could not match. The argument would be won on the deed itself, on whether the deed predated the trust in a way that held up under scrutiny. It does, Muse said. The deed is clean, filed in good order. The family trust in 1971 makes no mention of an existing deed because at that point Barnett Grant appears to have been hoping the county office simply wouldn't look back that far. A pause. People in 1971 frequently got away with hoping county offices wouldn't look. But now we have a certified copy and a legal argument that says a properly filed deed of record is not automatically superseded by a family trust that fails to acknowledge it. It's not always this straightforward, but in this case, the record is clear and in our favor. He sounded for the first time cautiously settled. I believe we can hold this. I want to be clear that I believe not that I know, but the ground is better than it might have been. And the money. The money is more complicated. A pause. As personal property left to a named beneficiary via letter of instruction, which is what Solviegg's letter constitutes, it occupies a gray area. They can argue it. We can argue it back, but it's not clean. She hung up and looked at the ceiling. $28,600. 40 years compressed into stacked bills. They wanted that too. Of course they did. On the third morning, the phone rang. Not the wall phone. Her cell phone, which she had kept charged on the one outlet near the lobby desk, the signal here being 1 bar of something that wasn't quite reliable, but was something. A number she recognized, which she had added to her contacts the day she called. She picked up. Miss Farley. The voice was different from before, still careful, but warmer, like something had shifted in the building where the voice was located. My name is Hilda Ost. I'm the senior care coordinator at Pinecrest. We spoke earlier. Yes, I gave Ms. Grant your message yesterday evening. A breath, a deliberate one. I want to be honest with you. I have worked here for 11 years. In 11 years, Ms. Grant has not asked to speak with anyone from outside this facility. Not once. Another breath. This morning, she asked me to make a phone call for her. Dwin pressed her back against the wall. She wants to speak to you, Hilda said. I need you to understand something first. She is 83 years old. She has lived here for 35 years. The world outside these walls is she has not experienced it in a very long time. So whatever you say to her, I need you to say it carefully. I understand. She'll pick up in a moment. Silence. Long silence. The kind of silence that has texture to it. The kind that is not empty, but full of someone on the other end of the line, deciding for the last time or the first time whether to speak. Then a voice. Old, but not weak. Not the thin, papery voice Dwin had somehow expected. A voice that had the quality of something that had been very still for a very long time and had not lost its depth in the stillness. You said the lodge. Yes, you said the flowers came back. They come back every year. They're blooming right now, in December, in the snow. A silence, very long. They do that, Idris said. I planted them with bulbs I brought from the creek bed. You have to plant marigolds from bulbs if you want them to return. Seeds are unreliable. Bulbs remember. Dwin closed her eyes. How many did you plant? 47. I counted each one. A pause. I was 12 years old. Solveig helped me carry the bulbs up the hill. She complained the whole way. She got mud on her shoes and she was furious. Another pause, this one softer, full of something that had been held a long time. She always complained about the mud, and she always helped anyway. That was Solveig. Was. Past tense. She kept them, Dwin said. She paid someone to tend them for years, and then they took over themselves. There are hundreds now. They've gone all the way around the porch. Silence. Not an empty silence. The silence of someone receiving something they had believed they would never receive. The silence of someone putting something down that has been very heavy for a very long time. She kept them, Idris said. She kept everything, the whole lodge, for 40 years. She kept it for you. More silence. I believed, Idris said slowly, that she had forgotten, or not forgotten, that she had moved on, that the lodge was hers and she had made a life there, and I was a thing from before, a thing she had set down. Her voice remained steady, but just barely. I believed that for 60 years. She wrote you every month. They told me she had stopped. She never stopped. And then, because it needed to be said cleanly, her letters were sent back, not by you, someone else. Someone who had his name on the back of every return envelope. Silence. Barnett Grant, Idris said. The name came out very flat. Old anger exhausted into something quieter than anger. The statement of a fact about the world that had cost too much to remain surprising. His son came to see me once, 2 years ago. Lexton. Another pause. He wanted me to sign something. Did you? No. Simple, certain. I have been called many things. Foolish is not one of them. Dwin almost smiled. Almost. Idris, I have a certified copy of a deed filed in 1965. Your father signed it. It names you as the legal owner of Veldon Crossing Lodge. Lexton Grant is trying to challenge it in court, but the deed is valid, and the attorney believes we can hold it. She breathed. The lodge is yours. It has always been yours. Solveig didn't own it. She kept it. The silence this time was different from all the other silences. It was the silence of a fact landing in a person's body. Not surprise, or not only surprise, more like recognition, like a thing a person has known in some unreachable part of themselves finally being confirmed by the world outside. She kept it, Idris said. Yes, for me. Yes, all of it. All of it. The garden, the lamp, The whole 40 years. A sound came down the line then, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob, something in between, something that sounded like 60 years of a particular kind of grief, finding the particular shape of its release. The lamp, Idris said, when she could speak again, quiet. She kept the lamp on. Peter Uva keeps it on now, every night. He said Solveig asked him to. Another long silence. Peter Ulva, Idris said. Is he still enormous? Yes. He's very tall. He was 19 the summer I left. He had just started working with his father. He could carry a full beam on one shoulder. The smallest pause. He was kind. I remember that. He was one of the few. He's still kind, Dwin said. He makes very weak coffee. Another sound. This one unambiguously a laugh, thin and surprised and real. The laugh of someone who has not used those particular muscles in a while and finds them still working. Solveig always complained about his coffee. He told me. He said she always said he made it too strong. She was lying. She drank 3 cups every time he made it. A breath, a settling. Will you? She stopped, started again. Would you be willing to come? Dwin looked around the lobby, the amber light, the key hooks, the marigolds just visible through the window, their orange heads leaning toward the glass. I was going to ask you the same thing, she said. The court date came first. 3 weeks later, County Court Caldwell. 1 room wood-paneled, the kind of courtroom that existed in a building that had been a courthouse for 100 years and intended to be one for 100 more. Garrett Muse sat across from 2 attorneys from Billings. They had a presentation folder. He had a legal pad and the certified copy of the 1965 deed, which he set on the table with the care of someone placing the decisive piece in a game that had been running for 60 years. Lexton Grant sat behind his attorneys. He did not look at Dwin, which told her something. The argument was what Muse had predicted. The Billings attorneys argued the 1971 trust represented the controlling document. Muse argued the 1965 deed predated and superseded it. The judge, a woman in her 60s, with reading glasses pushed up into gray hair and the expression of someone who had sat through many versions of this particular disagreement, read the deed. Read the trust. Read the deed again. She asked one question. The 1971 trust document, does it make any reference to the existence of a prior deed for this property? The Billings attorneys conferred. No, Your Honor. She looked at them over her reading glasses. Then how does the trust establish authority over property for which a prior deed of record already exists and which it does not acknowledge? Silence. Very complete silence. It doesn't, Muse said simply. The judge set the papers down, looked at Lexton Grant, the look of a person who has seen this particular move many times and is tired of seeing it. She dismissed the petition, the money question, the claim on the cash. She referred to a further hearing, but indicated clearly that personal property left by instruction of the decedent and not part of any trust was unlikely to constitute estate assets under current statute, which was not a final guarantee, but it was the shape of one. Dwin walked out of the courthouse into the December cold with Garrett Muse, and the sky was the specific blue-gray of Montana winter that she had decided at some point in the last 3 weeks was her favorite color, cold and clear and entirely honest about what it was. Well, Muse said. Well, she said. He did not celebrate. He was not a celebrating kind of man. He just nodded once in the way of someone checking a box that had been open for a long time. Then quietly, Lexton did not contest the dismissal. He left before the session closed. A pause. Some men know when the record has spoken. You'll want to call Ms. Grant, he said. I will. And the property will need to be properly transferred to her name, which involves paperwork, a fair amount of it. I expected that. It will take some weeks. I know. He looked at her. For a moment, just a moment, the professional, careful surface gave way to something more human. Solvig chose well, he said, and then he went back to his car. Dwyn stood on the courthouse steps and called Pinecrest home. Hilda Ost answered. We won, Dwyn said. A pause. I'll tell her, Hilda said, and then, she's been sitting by the window all morning. She does that on days she's expecting news. She says she can think more clearly when she can see the sky. The drive to Missoula was 3 hours. Torben drove. Again. He had offered not in words exactly. He had appeared at the lodge at 7 in the morning on the day Dwyn had arranged to go with the truck running and a thermos of coffee, strong, actual coffee, because he was not Petter, and when she came out he said, ready. She was ready. Zora was in the back seat. She had asked to come. She had asked simply and without explanation, and Dwyn had said yes, without asking for one, because some things you understood without the words. The mountains were very white, the sky very blue, 3 hours of silence and coffee, and the sound of the truck engine and the mountains going by. At some point in the second hour, Zora said, I should have gone in 1989. I drove to that place, and I sat in the parking lot, and I told myself I had no proof she was there. That was a lie. I knew. I was afraid. Nobody said anything. I have been afraid for 60 years, Zora said, of the wrong things, of what the family would do, of being wrong, of being right. She looked out the window. She's been 30 minutes from me for 35 years. The mountain road ran straight for a long moment. She doesn't know that, Dwyn said. No, so you can tell her or not tell her. That's yours to decide. A pause. But I don't think she's the kind of person who would hold it against you. Zora was quiet. No, she said finally. She never was. Pinecrest home sat on a green slope outside Missoula, the lawn snow-covered and smooth, a long, low building of brick and white trim with large windows on the south side to catch the light. The sign at the gate was small and unassuming Pinecrest home, long-term residential care. Hilda Ost met them at the door. She was in her 40s, small, careful moving, with the competence of someone who had spent years calibrating how much information to give and when. She looked at Dwyn, then at Zora, then at Torben, who was large and quiet in the doorway. She's in the sunroom, Hilda said. She asked to be there this morning. She looked at Dwyn. She got up at 5. She dressed herself. She asked me to open the window 2 inches. Is that unusual? She hasn't asked me to open a window in 3 years. Hilda began walking. She communicates very precisely. She will say exactly what she means. She may not say a great deal. She remembers everything with a precision that makes people uncomfortable, Dwyn said. Hilda looked at her. Yes, actually, yes. I know, Dwyn said. It's not uncomfortable. It's how she makes sense of the world. It's how she keeps the things that matter from getting lost. Hilda looked at her a moment longer. Then she led them to the sunroom. The sunroom ran the length of the south side of the building. Tall windows, wicker chairs with cushions in faded green, a black cat asleep on a rug in a patch of winter light, one paw over its nose, potted plants on the sills, real ones green and tended the kind that required attention, and at the far end, in a chair by the largest window, facing out toward the mountain visible on the horizon, a small woman, white hair braided and pinned, hands folded in her lap with the precision of someone who has learned to hold stillness as a practice, a knit shawl over her shoulders, dark blue, and on the sill beside her placed there deliberately clearly 3 marigold blossoms in a glass of water. Where had she gotten marigolds in December in Missoula? Hilda caught Dwyn's look. She asked the kitchen staff to find them. She said quietly. It took 2 days. Someone drove to 3 stores. Idris Graunt had been waiting for 2 days with marigolds in a glass of water. Dwyn walked the length of the sunroom. Idris heard her coming, turned her head, and Dwyn stopped because the eyes. She had not been prepared for the eyes. She had been told by Zora, by the letter, by everything she had read and heard, that Idris was remarkable, was perceptive, was precise. But the eyes were the thing, very dark, very direct, the eyes of a person who had spent 83 years observing the world with unmediated attention and had arrived at a clarity that most people never reached because most people spent their energy on managing other people's perceptions of them. Idris had stopped doing that approximately 60 years ago. What was left was just looking. "You're young," Idris said. 19. Solveig was 19 when she came to find me. A pause. I suppose that's not a coincidence. I don't know. I'm still figuring out what is and isn't. Something shifted in Idris's face. Not quite a smile, but the territory around one. "Sit down," she said. "You're making me nervous standing there." Dwyn sat on the footstool beside the wicker chair, close enough that Idris didn't have to raise her voice. "You have the deed," Idris said. "Garrett Muse has it. The court dismissed Lexton's petition 3 days ago." "I know. Ms. Ost told me." A pause. "Lexton came to see me 2 years ago. He had papers he wanted me to sign." "What kind of papers?" "A relinquishment of any claim to the lodge, in exchange for a lump sum." Her voice was very dry. "He said the lodge was in disrepair, unsalvageable, not worth the trouble." "He said the same thing to me." "Yes, I imagine he did." She looked out the window at the mountain. "I did not sign. Mas, not because I had plans for the lodge. I had no plans. I had not thought about the lodge in..." She stopped, started again. "I had thought about it every day for 60 years, but I had stopped expecting to see it again." She unfolded her hands, folded them again. "I didn't sign because he reminded me of his father, and I had learned a very long time ago that when someone who reminds you of Barnett Grant offers you a transaction, the transaction is never in your favor." Smart. 60 years of practice. Dwyn reached into her coat pocket, took out the coin, the silver one, worn smooth at the edges, the 4 numbers on the back. She set it on the arm of Idris's chair. Idris looked at it for a long time. She picked it up with 2 fingers, turned it over, ran her thumb across the numbers. "Where did you find this?" "Garrett Muse. Solveig left it with him a year before she died. She said to give it to the person who came. She kept it. Very quiet. I gave her this coin when I was 15. I found it in the creek bed near where I used to collect the bulbs. Old silver. I don't know what it was originally. I could never read the face too worn. But the date on the back." She paused. "I told her this is the year Papa finally did something right. Keep it." And she stopped again. "She kept it. She kept everything." Idris closed her hand around the coin. And Dwyn saw it then, the thing she had been building toward for 3 weeks without knowing it, the thing the coin and the deed and the letters and the lamp had all been pointing at. The real reason Solveig had left the lodge to a stranger, had sent the letter, had kept the money and the garden and the lamp and the coin, not because she wanted someone to inherit, because she could not go herself, because by the time she knew she was dying, she was too old and too tired, and she had written every letter she could write, and the doors had stayed closed, and so she had done the only thing left to her. She had lit a lamp, and she had sent for someone young enough and stubborn enough and quiet enough to go where she could not, to find the sister she had been writing to for 40 years, to bring her home. "There's something else," Dwyn said. She reached into the inside pocket of the coat, the other thing she had brought, the thing she had taken from the box. Zora had given her the oldest envelope in the stack, the first one, 1964, Barnett Grant's initials on the back flap. She had opened it. She had read it. This is the first letter Solveig ever sent you, Dwin said. It was returned by your father without being opened, but I opened it. Before I came, I thought you should know what's in it before you read it, so it doesn't come at you without warning. Idris looked at the envelope. Her face was very still. Tell me, she said. She wrote, I found out where they sent you. I am going to find you. I don't know how yet, but I am going to find you, and I am going to bring you home. This is my promise. Please write back. Dwin paused. She wrote it the year you were sent away. She was 20 years old. The sunroom was completely silent. Even the cat had raised its head. Idris looked at the envelope in Dwin's hand for a long, long time. Then she held out her palm. Dwin placed the envelope in it. Idris did not open it. She held it against her chest, both hands. The way you hold something when you are not ready to look at it, but you need to confirm that it is real, that it exists, that it always existed even when you could not see it. She promised, Idris said. Yes, she was 20. Yes, she kept the promise. Dwin thought about this, about the particular definition of kept, a promise you make at 20 and spend 60 years trying to honor most of it in silence, most of it without any sign it was reaching anyone. She kept trying, Dwin said. She never stopped trying, she just couldn't get through. But the lodge, she stopped, found the right words. The lodge was the promise made physical. 40 years of I am here, I am waiting, you have a home, come back when you can. Idris closed her eyes. She sat very still for a moment. Then she said quietly to no one in particular, or possibly to someone in particular who was not present in the sunroom, You kept it, Solly, you kept it. Zora had been standing in the doorway. She had come in quietly at some point. Dwin had not noticed. She was just there, small and silver-haired and very straight in the doorway between the hall and the sunroom, not coming forward. Idris opened her eyes. She saw Zora. A long, long silence, the kind of silence that has decades in it. Zora Streck, Idris said, very quietly. Yes. Zora's voice was barely a sound. It's me. You're old. So are you. Something crossed Idris's face. A flash, quick and real. Come here, Idris said. Don't stand in the doorway. I haven't had a visitor in 40 years, and I will not have the first one hovering at the threshold. Zora came. She sat in the wicker chair beside Idris, and they looked at each other in the particular way of two people who last saw each other when one of them was being taken away and have spent every year since wondering. I drove to this place, Zora said. In 1989, when it opened. Idris went very still. I sat in the parking lot. I didn't come in. A pause. Why not? I was afraid. Zora said it simply, without defense. I was 35 years old and I was afraid, and I told myself I didn't know for certain you were here and... She stopped. I knew I was lying to myself. Silence. Zora. Idris's voice was very quiet. I have been 30 minutes from you for 35 years. Yes. And you drove here and sat in the parking lot and went home. Yes. Silence. Then Idris said, I would have done the same thing. Zora looked at her. Fear makes cowards of everyone eventually, Idris said. The question is what you do when the cowardice is over. She turned back to the window. The cowardice is over. You're here. And then she reached over and took Zora's hand, simply, without drama, the way you take the hand of someone you have known since you were both children and will always underneath all the years and the distance still be children with. Zora made a sound, just one, small and broken and 60 years old. Idris held her hand and looked out the window at the mountain. The matter of the letters in the box came last. Hilda Ost brought it in. She had been holding it since Dwin called to say she was coming. The carton box from the archive room, the one that had arrived from Harwood when it closed in 1981, the one that had passed from administrator to administrator, from one nurse's care to the next, traveling forward in time without anyone quite knowing what to do with it. Hilda had inherited it from the coordinator before her, who had inherited it from the one before that, and all of them had kept it because it had a name on the outside, and it did not feel right to throw away something with a name on it. Inside 47 envelopes, not the ones Solveig had sent, the other ones, the ones Idris had sent, to Solveig, every month like clockwork for 40 years. Every one of them stopped somewhere between here and Velden by the same mechanism that had stopped Solveig's letters going the other direction, the same family, the same silence, the same deliberate erasure, never received, never read. 47 letters from Idris, 47 letters from Solveig, the same number, both directions, two women writing into the dark, neither one knowing the other was still writing. The exact same faithfulness moving in opposite directions stopped at the same wall. Hilda set the box on the table in front of Idris. She did not explain. She stepped back, because this was not a moment that needed explanation. Idris looked at the box for a very long time. Then she looked at Dwyn. "She never got these," she said. "No. She thought I wasn't writing." "Yes. She wrote every month for 40 years believing I had stopped." "Yes." Idris was quiet, processing, not with grief, or not only with grief, with the clarity that comes when a very large thing is finally revealed to have been exactly what you feared it was, and the relief of knowing, even the terrible relief, is bigger than the pain of confirmation. "So she was in the dark," Idris said, "the same dark I was in, just on the other side of the wall." "Yes, all this time, yes." Idris looked at the box. "Then she did not know," she said. "She spent 40 years not knowing if I was alive, not knowing if I was well, not knowing if I remembered her or hated her, or—" She stopped. She kept the lodge because it was the only way she knew to say, "I am still here. I have not given up," without knowing if anyone was listening. She kept the lamp on. She kept the lamp on. Idris touched the box, did not open it, not yet. She was braver than I knew. I knew she was brave. But this— She shook her head very slightly. "This is 40 years of courage in a cedar box." The sunroom was still. Then Idris looked at Dwyn directly. "You're going to ask me to come," she said. "I am. To the lodge. To your lodge. The one with your name on the deed. The one with your marigolds out front." A pause. "The one with the lamp on." Silence. "I have not been outside of Missoula in 35 years, Idris said. "I know. I am 83 years old. I know. The last time I was at that lodge, I was 22. I left in the back of a car that I did not choose to get into. This time you choose." Long silence. Idris looked out the window at the mountain that was, Dwyn realized, the same range. Same mountains she could see from the lodge. Different angles, same peaks, as if Idris had spent 35 years looking at the far side of the thing she was being asked to go back to. "Yes," Idris said, "just that. Yes, it took 2 weeks to arrange. Paperwork, medical clearance, conversations with Hilda about what was needed and what was wise and what was, as Hilda put it in her careful way, more complicated than a 2-hour drive. Peter built a ramp. He did not tell anyone he was building it. He just appeared one Tuesday morning at the lodge with cedar boards and a level and spent the day at the foot of the porch steps in the cold. When Dwyn came out at noon with coffee, he drank it without stopping work. By 4 o'clock, there was a ramp, smooth, solid, wide enough, the cedar pale and fragrant and new. "Did she ask for this?" Dwyn said. "She didn't need to." He ran his hand along the railing he had attached, tested it. Firm. "She planted those flowers when she was 12 years old. She should be able to get up her own porch." Clova Wen made 3 kinds of soup, enough to fill the large freezer in the lodge kitchen. She carried them up in the truck in covered pots and organized them by label in the freezer with the methodical care of a woman who had thought about this for a long time. White bean, chicken, and root vegetable, something with barley and herbs. She's going to need to eat, Clova said, simply. Rufus came and checked the heating system again. All of it, every radiator, every pipe. He bled the valves in the right order and replaced 2 that were showing wear, and then sat in the kitchen and drank coffee and did not bill for the parts because he said he was still working on the sideways debt. Zora came every day, sometimes to help, sometimes just to sit at the kitchen table and drink tea. She had in the 2 weeks driven back to Missoula twice to see Idris, which Duin had not suggested and did not comment on. Some things arranged themselves, and Torben. Torben came on a Wednesday evening when Duin was on the porch trying to clear ice from the steps with a bar she had found in the shed. He took the bar from her without asking, did the whole length of the porch, then the ramp methodically each board. She watched him work. You come a lot, she said. Roads need driving, he said. Petter sends you. A pause. Sometimes. And sometimes. He kept working. Then, Solveig used to say the lodge collects people. She said it the way people say a fire collects moths, not because the fire does anything, just because it's warm and the moths are cold. He knocked ice off the last board, stood up, looked at her. This place is warm again. She looked at the lamp on the porch, burning in the early dark. Yeah, she said, it is. The day Idris came home, the temperature dropped to -12 before dawn and warmed. By the time Torben's truck came up Grant Road, the sky had gone the pale crystalline blue of a Montana winter morning that has decided to be beautiful about it, and the marigolds were more open than they had been in days, the tight copper-orange heads loosened in the thin winter sun. Duin did not try to explain it. She had stopped trying to explain the marigolds. They did what they did, and Velden had long since made its peace with that. Petter was on the porch. He had swept it clean at first light. He was wearing his good flannel dark green, no visible men's, and he had taken his cap off and was holding it against his chest when the truck came up the drive. Clova was in the kitchen. She would not say she had been there since 6, but the soup was warm and the bread was fresh, and the entire lodge smelled of it warm and yeasty and alive, and she had arranged a jar of marigolds on the reception desk, which had required more driving and more stores than anyone had anticipated, and which she did not mention at all. Zora was in the parlor, sitting in the chair nearest the window, not looking out, looking at her hands, the posture of someone having a private conversation with themselves about something they needed to say and had been saying for 60 years and were finally quietly finishing. Duin stood at the top of the ramp. The truck stopped at the bottom of the drive. Torben got out, came around, opened the passenger door, and then the careful business of helping someone out of a truck when they are 83 years old and have not traveled in 35 years and are, Duin could see even from the distance, taking the whole thing in through the windshield before they committed to getting out. She waited. She had learned to wait. 11 days on a folding table, 3 weeks at the lodge waiting for a phone to ring. Waiting was not passive. Waiting was a thing you did with your whole body, a kind of held breath that was still breathing. Idris got out, small, dark coat, white braid down her back. She stood beside the truck and she looked up the drive at the lodge, and she did not move for a moment. Duin let her look, because this was the first time in 61 years that Idris Grant had seen the house she had planted a garden for when she was 12 years old, the house that had been waiting for her, the house that had been kept, and it should be seen, at length, without rushing. The marigolds were everywhere. along the ramp up through the snow, at the base of the porch posts, tucked into every crevice of the stone front wall where the cold let them, orange and gold and burnt copper, stubborn and impossible and right there. Idris walked up the drive slowly. She stopped at the base of the ramp. She looked at the marigolds. She reached out, touched one, very gently, with one finger, the way you touch something you are not sure you are allowed to touch but cannot help yourself. Then she looked up at Pater. Pater, who was standing at the top of the ramp with his cap against his chest, had the expression of a man who had spent 40 years keeping a promise to a woman who could not keep it herself and who had just watched the reason for the promise walk up the drive. "Miss Idris," he said. His voice was the quietest she had ever heard it. "Peter Uv," she said. "Are you still enormous?" Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile, the thing behind a smile. "I've been told I'm enormous, yes. You got old. You too." A pause. "You kept my flowers," she said, "for 60 years. He held out his hand. "Welcome home." She took it, and she walked up the ramp of the lodge that had her name on the deed, and her marigolds at the door, and her sister's 40 years of faithfulness in the cedar box in room 4, and Dwin stepped aside to let her through. Inside the lobby, Idris stopped. The amber lamp, the carved staircase, the brass key hooks behind the reception desk, the light moving through the tall windows in slow gold columns, the dust turning in it, the way the dust had turned on Dwin's first night, and the smell, cedar and cold stone and old wood, and underneath it all, faint and permanent, the scent that did not leave because it had been here for 60 years, marigolds. Idris closed her eyes. She breathed in, she breathed out, and very quietly to the amber air of the lobby, to the dust and the lamp and the worn brass hooks and the memory of every winter Solveig had spent here keeping the faith. "I'm home, Solly," she said. "I'm home." Dwin stood just inside the door and let the words settle into the walls. The lodge received them the way old buildings receive things, not with drama, but with the quiet of something that has been waiting to hear exactly this and has decided it can rest now. After a long moment, she slipped outside down the steps, out into the cold. The porch was empty. The lamp was burning. She sat on the top step and looked out at the mountains and let the night come in around her. She had the coin in her palm, turned it over. The numbers worn smooth now from 3 weeks of her thumb. 1965, the year a father had done one right thing, the year a deed had been filed that would survive 60 years of deliberate silence and one determined man's attempt to erase it, the year 2 sisters had stood on this porch, 112, 19, and planted 47 bulbs in the cold ground and argued about mud on shoes and had no idea at all, what those 47 bulbs would carry forward, what they would remember, what they would outlast. She held the coin until it was warm, which didn't take long anymore. The lamp on the porch was lit. Of course it was. From inside the lodge, through the wall, faint the sound traveling the way sound traveled in old stone buildings, she could hear voices. Zora and Idris in the parlor, the cadence of 2 people with 60 years between them, and a whole night to begin. She couldn't make out words, just the shape of the conversation, the specific music of it. Then clear and sudden and unguarded, Idris laughed. Real. The sound of someone using muscles they had not used in a long time and finding them still there, still working, still capable of the whole range. Dwin sat on the step and listened to it until it faded back into the quieter rhythm of voices. Then she stood up, put the coin in her pocket, went to the porch railing where the marigolds grew thickest, and she stood there a moment, looking out at the mountains going dark at the edges, now the sky deepening toward the specific blue-black of a Montana night that was going to be very clear and very cold and very full of stars. She thought about Solveig, who had sat on this step probably, who had looked at these mountains, who had written 47 letters every month to a sister she could not reach, and tended 47 marigolds she could not send, and kept the lamp every night for a person she could not find, and had done it anyway, because the alternative was stopping, and Solveig Ground did not know how to stop. She thought about her mother. You don't eat the whole mountain. And she thought about the 11 days on the folding table and the $19 and the bus ticket and the walk up the frozen road in the dark and the marigolds that had been the first thing she'd seen. Impossible. Orange gold. Right there. She thought, I am 19 years old and I have the lodge and Petter and Clova and Rufus and Torben and Zora and a coin and a certified deed and a room number 7, hers the fire laid and ready, and a freezer full of soup and a porch ramp that smelled like new cedar and a lamp that had been burning every night for 40 years and was going to keep burning. She had managed in 3 weeks with $2 and a bus ticket to do the thing a 40-year lodge had been built to wait for. She thought Solveig would have found that satisfying. Not dramatic, not a miracle, just the right person, the right moment, one foot in front of the other, and the patient, stubborn faithfulness of a house that had been told to keep and had kept. This was not the end of anything. This was a floor. This is what Solveig had meant. Not a solution, not a fixed thing, a floor, something to stand on while you figured out what came next. The lodge had been keeping. Now it would keep differently. 2 women in the parlor relearning each other. A cedar ramp smelling of new wood, a freezer full of soup, a lamp on a porch, and in the morning the marigolds would still be there because they remembered, because they had been planted by a child who had counted every bulb, because some things, when they are rooted in the right place and tended by the right hands, did not die in the winter. They just waited. They always came back. She had spent $14 on a bus ticket to a mountain town she had never heard of. She had walked 1.5 miles in the dark. She had stood in a doorway and refused to step back. She had knocked on every floor until she found the hollow sound. And the hollow sound had been full. It had always been full. It was waiting for someone who knew how to listen. Dwin Farley was 19 years old. She had spent $14 on a bus ticket, and it was without question, without any hesitation, the best $14 she had ever spent.